It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all, but was ordered to seal it up until the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history. From Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation.
As it was in the days of Noah. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and you know what? I'm just grateful to be here today. We hadn't planned on even doing an Unraveling Revelation this week because some of you may know that I've been dealing with shingles. I'm still dealing with shingles, but today is one of my first days where I actually feel well enough to come back on to actually get dressed and get out of my jammies, come to work. And so since we were on the way back from the doctor anyway, I said, let's go and see if we can do an episode so we don't completely miss a week. We're just a little bit late with it.
The feedback that we've received to this program is really humbling because it's, you've been studying end times prophecy since you were a child.
Oh, I cut my teeth on it.
Raised in a church that taught it. I was raised in very liturgical denominations, and so we never cracked the book of Revelation and most of the apocalyptic books of the Bible as well, like Ezekiel and Daniel and the portions of Isaiah and Jeremiah, Zechariah, Zephaniah, Joel, Amos.
Here's the
none of that
sad
stuff.
truth, Derek. That's becoming more commonplace.
It is.
It used to be only true in high liturgical places, but churches, but now very mainline, I won't say the name of a denomination, but they're big denominations that dominate the South, let's just put it that way, that tend to steer away from prophecy.
Because it's weird, it's strange, it's scary, it's uncomfortable.
But as Mike Heiser says, if it's weird and strange, it's important.
Right, right. And a third of the Bible is prophecy. And so it's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, prophecies fulfilled corroborate and the truth claims of Christianity. We know the Bible is true because we can point to prophecies that have been fulfilled and say, you know, see, this was revealed to the prophets of old. This came true. So this we can trust. This Bible that we can trust, whether you're using a paper copy or a digital copy, you can trust the words in the Bible. Archaeology the same way. The stones are literally crying out in these days as archaeologists go into the field and say, hey, look at this is exactly where the Bible said it was supposed to be.
And as we've been able to go into the field and look at those same stones.
Right. So that's how we can, and taking that further, this is how we know that the promises made about the coming of the Son of Man, which is what we'll talk about today, are true and trustworthy. Yes, the end times won't be pleasant on earth, but for those of us who've placed our trust in Jesus Christ, we have a guarantee that even though we don't know how it's going to play out, because the enemy wants to create a deception that will lead many astray, and in fact, Jesus told us this would happen. So God being the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies, Yahweh of armies, He doesn't reveal His battle plans to the enemy. But we've got enough in here to know that our future is secure.
Amen.
So
Amen.
That's why we do this.
The last few weeks, we have emphasized the fact that you cannot understand the imagery and the prophecy within the book of Revelation or in Daniel if you don't understand what happened in the very beginning. So we went back to Genesis. Well, in a way, we're still in Genesis because what you opened with has to do with the Lord comparing the days in which we live, the end of days, to the days of Noah, and also later to the days of Lot. Can you sort of unpack that for us?
This is something that we've been following in the group, the circle of friends, this little bunch of weird Christians that we're part of.
And you just got back from a gathering of those weird Christians.
Right, the Sons of God, Giants of Old conference, which oddly enough featured about a half a dozen PhDs on the speakers list. So this is not something that is internet fringe conspiracy. This is, it's theology. It's
You're
solid
a PhD
theology.
in a way. You're pretty hot, Derek.
We can cut that part out.
I don't know. Don't cut that part out. I like that part. You're a cutie, honey.
So, well, thank you, love.
Well, you are.
And every room we're in, you're the prettiest one there. I don't know how you manage that.
Okay, we've also, you take time to vomit now if you feel like you need to.
One of the verses that's often cited to document or corroborate this idea that there were Nephilim giants in the earth in the days of Noah, which is a story that's told in the book of Genesis, chapters 6 through 9, is the scripture from Matthew chapter 24, beginning at verse 36. But concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. Jesus set aside that aspect of his divinity when he was on earth. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of man. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Let me read that one more time just to make sure I emphasize the proper syllables. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days, before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Now, you can say, okay.
There are a number of layers to that.
There really are. One of the reasons this is pointed to by those who believe in the Genesis 6 literal existence of those Genesis 6 giants, which we do, is that one of the unique things about the days of Noah was that there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, according to Genesis 6. And that has led some to conclude that the Nephilim are returning in our day. And I can see you can make a case for that, but I think there's another layer to this that maybe is more relevant. The verse, as it reads, seems to suggest that people in the days before the flood were completely oblivious to what was happening around them. They were just going about their everyday lives. Right. They were completely clueless.
That's the surface to this.
Right. That something was coming upon the earth. Now, what other aspects of life in the days before the flood might have been unique to those? Well, that's a good question, but we also can't ignore the parallel verse in the Gospel of Luke.
Right.
And in the Gospel of Luke, we read the same story, except that it adds another dimension. Luke chapter 17, beginning at verse 26. Just as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the days of the Son of Man. They were eating and drinking and marrying and being given in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Same story as we read in the Gospel of Matthew. But verse 28 continues, likewise, just as it was in the days of Lot. So if the Nephilim were destroyed, and we don't read any stories of Abraham and Lot encountering giants, although the Rephaim tribes, who were considered to be of
like the Anakim.
Unusual size, yes, like the Anakim, who lived in the area of east of the Jordan River, which is where Sodom is located, east of the Jordan, in what it would have been Moab later. But we don't see any indications that they had those types of encounters like David and his men did about 400 years later, or well, say about 700 years after the time of Abraham and Lot. As it was in the days of Lot, they were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building. But on the day when Lot went out from Sodom, fire and sulfur rained from heaven and destroyed them all. So will it be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. So it seems to suggest, when you compare Luke and Matthew, that the emphasis is on people just being oblivious, not just that anything was coming, but kind of oblivious to their spiritual direction. They were sinning, as we read in the book of...
But they were self-absorbed with their lives. They
self-absorbed,
weren't paying attention to what was going on around them. Well, I have said that was the first layer. I think, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I think there is a second layer to this, and it's why the Lord chose those two time periods, one pre-flood, one post, that the activities that were going on that are listed as marrying and giving in marriage and eating and drinking, those are activities that are also cult activities.
That is a good point. That's one of the things that we learned as we researched as we've been researching over the last couple of years for several books, but the book coming out in October, Veneration, which is about the cult of the dead in the ancient world and how it was reflected in the Bible. It is reflected in the Bible in terms of the theology of the Israelites. Isaiah in particular goes after those who are eating and offering sacrifices to the dead in gardens, living amongst the tombs, eating pork and tainted broth and so forth. But we see it in Psalm 106, verse 28, where the psalmist, remembering the story of Phinehas, who was the son, he was a Levitical priest, grandson of Aaron, if I remember correctly, who speared the Israelite prince and Midianite princess who had come into the camp and were engaged in what appears to have been some sort of fertility rite.
Skewered them both at the same time.
Right. But the psalmist, who was writing probably 400 years later, during the time of David, didn't even mention that aspect of it. I mean, to us, that would be shocking. They're doing this act where everybody knows what's going on, which was part of pagan worship back in the day, to Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte.
These are sexual fertility rites.
Exactly. But that wasn't what the psalmist mentioned. He said it was eating sacrifices offered to the dead that provoked the Lord to anger. And he sent a plague that killed 24,000 of the Israelites.
Yes.
This was before they crossed the Jordan River to attack Jericho.
Yes.
But it was Phinehas who said, well, I'm putting a stop to this with extreme prejudice, and that's what stopped the Lord's anger. So you may be onto something here. Now I'm looking at the Greek term translated as marry and given in marriage in Matthew and in Luke. And the word seems to be used consistently for that, that
an actual
husband and wife. Yeah, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. There were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died. If such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry. So that seems to be a consistent use throughout the New Testament, unlike other cases where sometimes a word will be translated a certain way into English, but it's not translated that way consistently.
Well, again, I'm not. This is not something I'm going to state a doctrine on and say it has to be this way. But this is one of the ways you and I learn.
Right.
Whenever we read aloud in the Gilbert House Fellowship, we go through and was this always there? And then we start to ask questions.
Right.
We ask, does this word mean what we think it does?
Right.
Because we often do that. We'll read a sentence like, they were eating and drinking, and assume we know exactly what it says.
Exactly, because we don't have the context of life in the 1st century A.D. or the 11th century B.C. or the 15th century B.C. or 18, whatever, and we miss
They didn't have
context.
the internet back then.
Right.
How did they survive?
Exactly. Dr. Heiser made a really good observation this past weekend at the Sons of God Giants of Old conference. He said, if I were to say to you now, boy, that's a real hot potato, you could do, 1,000 years from now, somebody could do a word search and go into the equivalent of the Strong's Concordance in the day and look up every occurrence of the word hot and potato and never get the sense of the meaning.
Exactly.
So understanding the worldview to help understand idioms and euphemisms that were used in the Old Testament, like when the sons of God went into the daughters of man.
Yes.
That's a euphemism.
Actually, we're going to go into that even more next week because we're going to discuss the 1st century mindset.
Right. What was going on?
Because you can't understand John's position until you know what he experienced.
Understand the political and cultural context of the 1st century. So, yes, and there are tools that you can use that would be really helpful. We love blueletterbible.com because not only do you get multiple English translations, you also get the Strong's Concordance, and then
tons of
you can find all of the occurrences in the Bible where that Greek word or Hebrew word or Aramaic word is used, and then compare the word in those other contexts. Is this word translated consistently in all of these contexts? And sometimes that will help. It's like, wait a minute, maybe the English translators here of the ESV, the KJV, whatever version you prefer to use, maybe they didn't translate this word consistently here in this particular verse for some reason, and then you can drill down deeper.
Maybe it's the only time the word ever appears, and therefore it's everybody's best guess.
Exactly. And that's where texts from other ancient cultures like Ugarit or Ebla, Mari, some of the other ancient Amorite cultures who used a very similar language, really helps to understand what was going on in the minds of the prophets when they wrote it.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more about Lot and the dig that's going on at Sodom right now.
Right, because there's some things there that took place at ancient Sodom, or a site that scholars are becoming convinced was ancient Sodom, that may shed some light on the days of Noah and the days of Lot. Unraveling Revelation continues after this.
When did the government alien programs originate and why? Who were the Collins elite, and were they exposing the dangers of such programs? What exactly did these black projects involve? Learn the astonishing answers to those questions and so much more. Skywatch TV is proud to announce the Higher Entities Ultra Collection. This special offer includes the new Fall Brothers feature film, Higher Entities, The Lost Tapes, which is a live-action documentary including up-close and personal discussions with former FBI agents, Department of Defense consultants, best-selling authors, and seasoned research professionals that deliver intimate testimonies of disclosure, which put you face-to-face on location and in the conversation, featuring Justin Fall, Dr. Thomas Horn, Ray Boucher, Derek Gilbert, Stan Dale, Darren Geisinger, Chad Riley, and Wes Fall. But that's not all. You'll also receive the top-secret 5-volume DVD collection, Project Stargate. This unprecedented series of never-before-released confidential interviews features 12 of the world's leading authorities on UFOs, so-called aliens, gods, and the coming day of contact. You'll be amazed as we go behind the scenes to ask experts what they really believe is coming. Watch as men with security clearances like the late Dr. Chuck Missler share for the first time what they know. Then take notes as Dr. Michael Heiser, the late Chris Putnam, Russ Dizdar, Joe Jordan, L.A. Marzulli, Daryl Sims, Gary Stearman, Joyce Aarons, and others as they weigh in on what will soon cause the world to stand still in awe. Project Stargate holds a retail value all by itself of $150, included now for a limited time in the Higher Entities Ultra Collection. Sold separately, this Ultra Collection holds a retail value of $175. Yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. So take advantage of this incredible offer now and receive all 5 Project Stargate DVDs along with the new Higher Entities documentary for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling now at the Skywatch TV store. Order the Higher Entities Ultra Collection online or call 1-844-750-4985.
Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are talking about the days of Noah and the days of Lot.
One of the things that's really been fascinating over the last year or so is following the work of the team from Trinity Southwest University at a dig site called Tal El Hammam. It's about 6 miles northeast of the Dead Sea in Jordan.
And we saw it. We weren't actually
Yes.
at it, but we could see it from Mount Nebo.
Yes, and it's incredible when you see it and you realize from Mount Nebo, where Moses looked toward Jericho on a clear day, which sadly we didn't have, a lot of dust from the Arabian desert had been blown up.
It was very hot too.
Yes, you can see the Mount of Olives from Mount Nebo. Now the Dead Sea is there, Jericho's there, and off in the right, and before you lies a green area, the green fertile plain, which is the area just as the Jordan River meets the Dead Sea. It really stands out because most of Jordan is very brown. It is one of the most water-impoverished places on the planet. But there's a little, like a promontory, like a little spur of rock, a little hill that kind of extends into the green area there. And that's where one of the science advisor, scientific director for the dig, Dr. Philip Sylvia, said, look for that when you're on Mount Nebo. I interviewed him back in February for my podcast, and he said, that's the dig site. Well, he presented a paper, an academic paper, to the American Schools of Oriental Research last November and presented the evidence, radiological evidence, chemical analysis, soil analysis, the archaeological finds that I think conclusively show that that site, Tal El Hammam, was the biblical Sodom.
Well, the chemical analysis of the soil I found really compelling.
Yes.
Because it seems to show that the salt content is the same as the salt content in the Dead Sea.
Right. At the destruction layer at the dig site, and bear in mind that this dig site where they were talking, the destruction layer of the city is about 75 to 125 feet above the plain.
Yeah.
And they
It was
found
a massive
Yeah,
event.
they found that every morning this white crust or film was on top of the destruction layer. It's like, what the heck is that? So they decided to test it, and they found that the chemical composition of the salts and sulfates matched exactly the chemical composition of the water
They
in the
were
Dead
leaching
Sea.
up to the top.
Right, so you got this something at some point, about 1700 BC, give or take 50 years, pushed water from the Dead Sea 6 miles inland at a height of 75 to 100 feet. We're talking a Tunguska-like explosion
Wow.
that destroyed the plain. And they estimate that at the time of this event, whatever it was, we believe this is when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, in
Yes.
case you're wondering, that as many as 45 to 50,000 people lived in that plain and were wiped out in the blink of an eye.
Wow.
And interestingly, now, this makes more sense of the story now of Lot's wife being turned to salt because she would have been hit by a wave of
That's tsunami.
superheated water that's
Salt
like
water,
36%
yes.
salt. So the fascinating thing about this, and this relates to your comment before the break about eating and drinking, one of the things we've learned over the last few years is that the Amorite culture, which would have been the dominant culture in the days of Abraham and Lot, required family members to hold a monthly ritual on the night of no moon, the 30th day of each lunar cycle, where they held a necromancy ritual to summon their deceased ancestors to a ritual meal.
Yes.
This was called the Kism. And they would have to serve them a meal which involved their little statues, idols that represented the ancestors, that would give them locality.
Right.
You know,
Sort of like tuning in a channel on a television.
right. They would show up and they would take bread and they would smear the bread on the little idols to feed the idol, and then they would pour water. In fact, the heir, the eldest son, was called the pourer of water of the family.
The son of the cup.
Right. And they would often bury the ancestors below the floor of the house, and sometimes even install a libation tube, a tube that would carry the water or beer or wine.
Make sure Grandpa got it?
Yes. This was part of the deal. In fact, this tradition continued into the Christian era. The earliest Christians in Rome, they found at St. Peter's Basilica, when they excavated and found the sarcophagus, the monument, the memorial for Peter, the sarcophagus next to Peter's has a libation tube in it.
Oh my
Put by the early
goodness.
Christians. This
Oh my
tradition
goodness.
extends, I mean, it's not all that different from modern day when you get these shrines to Santa Muerte or Jesus Malverde, or in other cultures, little shrines to the ancestors with little cups of wine or offerings. This has been going on for millennia.
Well, in
But
Sodom,
Sodom
though,
in particular.
they had dolmens.
Right. This is one of the things that struck me as I read the book by Dr. Dr. Stephen Collins, who's been leading the dig there for 15 years, that in the book, almost just in passing, he mentions there are more dolmens around the base of the site of ancient Sodom than anywhere else in the Jordan Valley. There are more concentrated in the Jordan Valley than anywhere on the earth. These are funerary monuments, 2 big slabs of rock with a slab across the top, sometimes with end slabs that
Looks sort of like a table.
It looks like a table, basically. Looks like a very small version of Stonehenge.
Yeah, one component is
One
Stonehenge.
component of Stonehenge. Dr. Sylvia told me that they believed that the dead would be placed on top and then defleshed, sort of a sky burial, and then the bones would be collected and used for ritual purposes, sometimes placed inside the dolmens, the rest buried beneath the floor. But this practice of summoning the ancestors to eat and drink would have been part of the monthly rituals in that part of the world.
So did these
Now,
dolmens provide locality for the so-called ancestral?
no way to know, because there are no inscriptions left as to what they were for or how they were used. Scholars date them between the time of, the beginning of the Bronze Age, 3300 BC or thereabouts. And we're using their official dating, okay, which does not coincide with the
It may
young
be
Earth, and
off
we
by
understand
300 or
that.
400 years.
May be off by a lot more than that. But we're using their dates just for convenience sake. Down to about the time of Abraham, down to about 1800 BC. So, and the newest ones would have been around Sodom. Well, I asked Dr. Sylvia, are they oriented astronomically towards constellations or stars or the sun? I said, no, they all seem to be pointed at the temple on the hill of Sodom. 1,500 at the base of Sodom, and they were all pointed at the temple, they believe.
Now, remember, too, that Lot had a position of authority.
Yes.
He had worked his way up to a person who was a judge at the gate. At Tel Dan, we saw what those judge seats looked like.
Very
it's
impressive.
like a throne.
Yep. Lot was a man of influence in Sodom, and Sodom was the most important city in the Levant, which is Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, south of Hatzor, which is north of the Sea of Galilee. So this was a very important site, important enough that an army marched all the way from modern Iran, which would have taken months, to go to war against Sodom and its allies. So a hugely important city. Lot was a man of influence. He had to leave and flee because when that whatever it was that God used to destroy the city hit, it wiped out that entire plain, including Jericho. Jericho on the other side of the river was destroyed at the same time.
Oh, my.
Yeah. And according to Dr. Sylvia, they found it was only reoccupied about 50 years before the Israelites showed up on the other side of the river.
Oops.
Yeah. But that was the suddenness with which Sodom was destroyed. Imagine a Tunguska-like meteoric explosion over the north end of the Dead Sea, sending the very top of that site is 150 feet above the plain.
That's quite a tsunami.
A couple 100-foot high wave of salt water, superheated, washing across the plain.
Wow.
Nothing would grow there based on the soil samples they took down in the valley for about 700 years, down to the time of Solomon and David, or David and Solomon.
My goodness.
And that was how fast it all wiped out.
Well, like I said, next week we're going to be discussing the first century church and what they knew, how they understood the world. And they would have known all of this. John would have been aware of these practices.
Right.
And the historical proliferation of them. And I would say because Jesus compares now to then, that we have to look for the same activities now.
Right. And I think that's the key point here. And that's one of the takeaways, I think, from the Sons of God Giants of Old conference as well, is that we can focus on the size, the stature of the Nephilim, and then their spiritual descendants, the Rephaim, the Anakim, which, by the way, were titles more than genetic bloodline descendants. It was like a warrior cult from the ancient world. But we don't spend enough time looking at their nature. Who did they worship? Which God did they serve?
Yes. And how are we serving that same God or gods today?
Yes, in our society, we are very much...
Sometimes even in the churches.
Yes,
I hate
trying
to
to
say
make
that, but that's
contact
true.
with the dead it's a practice that's entered into some of our churches.
Yes.
It's strictly forbidden by God. So I think that's an aspect of the days of Noah and the days of Lot that we sort of have missed in focusing too much on size.
Oh my
and not,
goodness, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's why we wrote a book on it.
Well, it is, isn't it? And that will be out in late October.
Yes. Well, you get the sense of our excitement as we dig into the Scripture here to try to find more. But that's the amazing thing about the Word of God. You can never run out of things to learn. And we thank you for watching. With Sharon Gilbert, I'm Derek Gilbert. This is Unraveling Revelation from Skywatch TV.